Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Rye Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Alright, today's video, what's bugging you, what's bugging the park? Well, it's bugs, it's critters, it's all sorts of things, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the critters that live at your park. Let's get into it.
Now get ready, here we go.
Okay, today's video, I got my, it's Halloween this week, so I'm going to wear this for this video. Figure it's a great thing, right? Let's get right into the topic. Alright, if this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. I do stuff like this all the time. Like, subscribe, share. It does help me out. I do appreciate it, especially if you find yourself coming back for another time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. It does help out my channel. Alright, today's video. It was sparked by, I was going outside with my wife, and we were looking at the house, and she said, "Oh, there's a giant spider web over there. Can you clean that up for me?" And I'm looking at it, and it was just stretched between our two columns, which are pretty far apart from each other. And I'm like, "Oh, that's one of the giant orb spiders." And she says, "Well, is that really bad?" And we started talking about it, and we just started going over this stuff, and I would say, "Oh no, we did all this stuff at my old work, and we did this, and we did that." And she said, "Well, you know, that'd be an interesting topic." So I'm like, "Yeah, kind of would." So let's talk about some of the things at parks. Okay, so when you're around your house, when you're around the park and everywhere else, there are bugs, there are wild animals. Where are those inside of the amusement park? Well, they're everywhere. They're in the rides, they're in the queue lines, they're in the food areas, they're everywhere. You can't escape them. So parks have to work quite diligently to make sure these critters don't bug you on a day-by-day basis. So there's lots of things parks can do to control them, and there's things that parks can't really do to control them. Most parks hire like a pest control service to come in and do the same thing like you would around your house. They spray the outside of buildings. They put traps down for bigger animals. They do all sorts of things like that. I was actually working at an amusement park that had animals there. So we already had animals. So that added an extra layer of complexity to it because we could not simply just go out and spray for bugs and do things like that, where we would lay down lots of poisons around there because we were worried about the animals and them reacting to it or possibly getting into that poison that is for those nuisance pests around the park. So what that did is that caused everyone, it caused the entire staff, mechanics, food services, everybody to become more diligent about their areas to keep their stuff clean. So when it comes to pest control, the number one thing you can do is actually to maintain the food outside of the area. So all the critters, everything that comes into the park is there for pretty much one reason. They're there because it's a food source. Parks are notorious for people dropping food on the grounds, littering in the back areas, all sorts of stuff like that. So those animals know that, and they come there and they want to get that extra food and take it back with them. So that just causes those animals to stay around more. So the first step of prevention is to remove the food source. And the second step is really to make it unhospitable for them to stick around. Now, I've got plenty of little stories and things like that from around the park that I've had over the many, many years of working there to make things inhospitable for those animals to stay around. But I'm going to cover some little topics here and there. I'm going to try to go by animal, but there's a lot of like free-floating stories that are going to be in this one. So you might just have to bear with me on this one. All right, some pests and animals you can coexist with, others you can't. You just want to like get them out of your area. One of those things that you can't really coexist with just because they don't want to coexist with you is skunks. Our park had a bad skunk problem. Like once everyone started clearing out of the park and the sun started going down, the skunks started coming out of the woodworks. I mean, they would just start coming out of everywhere. I'd be driving along, and I'd be in my little golf cart driving around the park, and I'd be crossing one plaza way, and I just look over, and there was like a line of 5 skunks just crossing the pathway. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So one of the things that we would do is we would walk around the park at nighttime, especially. You carry a flashlight with you. There was plenty of park lighting and stuff like that, but the light visually wobbling in front of you was kind of like a warning that somebody was coming. So if there was something around the corner, it had time to scurry away. One of the times I came around the corner and I just turned the corner from this wooded fence and stopped right there because right in front of me was a skunk. Now, when you picture a skunk, you probably picture it like most people do, which is where they look kind of long, lengthy, and they look like a cat. It does. It looks like a cat with a white or 2 white stripes down the top of it. So most people think, okay, that's a skunk. And then when they put their tail up, it's like it's ready to spray. Well, I didn't know the finites of that because I know when they put their tail up, they're ready to spray. But one of the interesting things is that you can see a skunk, it'll confront you, it'll put its tail up, but it's not ready to spray at that point in time. Then when you get closer to it, it will get bunched up, kind of like a cat does where it arches its back and turns into like a U on top. It bunches up, and it's just like, okay, it squishes itself further and further, and then eventually it will. Now this is an interesting one I found out. For a skunk to spray, they can only spray while they're actually on their front legs. So the skunk will actually turn around so its rear end is towards you and then kick its rear legs up in the air and spray at the same time. Now, we used to have skunks living underneath our actual, like our lead shack where we would go and just prep and get ready for the day, and we do paperwork and stuff like that. And there it was a small like a tough shed, it was a small shed type area. But skunks, they are great diggers, and they would dig underneath that shed, and they would just start living in there since the shed had a raised floor. It wasn't a slab of concrete; it was a raised floor. So skunks would always dig underneath there and make their home. So when you walked into that lead shack, was what we called it, the lead shack, it always smelled like skunk inside of there. Now, most people know the smell of skunk, but when you're really close to it and they have just sprayed, it smells like burnt rubber. That's the smell that I get from it. It's like burnt rubber when it's really bad. It doesn't even have that skunk smell yet to it. Really potent stuff. At the time, we were a Six Flags park, so we had all the Warner Brothers stuff for all the cartoon characters. I was actually going through a phase. I mean, I still like it. I love watching stuff on like lots of history stuff. Like, so I will watch, like, if I see a special on Groom Lake, Area 51, I will stop and watch that special, because the amount of amazing technology that's come out of Area 51 is just incredible. And so the main team, the main company kind of that was working out of Area 51 was, I believe, if I'm getting my facts straight, it was Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. That's what they called it. Now, on like the SR-71 Blackbirds and those jets, on the front nose gear door, when the nose gear is down, they've got a picture of a skunk, I believe it is, with a gas mask on, and that is their like mascot for the Skunk Works team. So, as a tribute and kind of a funny thing, since we always called it the lead shack or the skunk shack out front, I actually asked a sign shop to make up a picture of Pepe Le Pew sitting out there. It said Skunk Works on top of it. So I thought that was funny. So it's like that sign hung out there for a long time while I was there. But then we go around the park. Now, these things will get into everything. They will dig into trash cans. They will get underneath stuff, and they hide throughout the day. But the problem is that if they get scared, they will spray, and it smells horrible. No one wants to be around it. So they will get into stuff, and then we have to figure out how to get them out of there. Now, we ourselves are typically not getting out of there. What we do is we would tell a contractor that came into the park that was their job to remove the skunk. So what we'd have to do is they'd have to trap the skunk. They'd use a trap, an outdoor trap, covered in a tarp. That way it could spray and it wouldn't get all over everything. But I will never forget this one time. It was underneath in our kids area. We had this little pirate ship. I forgot who made the thing. It was Sansi or something like that. I don't remember the exact manufacturer. It was this little tiny, little itty bitty traveling pirate ship. And a skunk got down underneath there. We had to get the ride down because we tried running the ride a little bit with the skunk underneath there, and it sprayed. So it's like, okay, we can't do that. So we had to have him come out there, and it was in this recessed pit area, so he put a trap down there. We had to wait for 2 days until eventually he caught the skunk. And then he took it out. We opened up the ride that day. The next morning, that skunk was back down there. And I talked with him. I said, man, how... different skunk? Like, what's the deal? He says, no, that's probably the same skunk. I'm like, well, what do you guys do with the skunks when you catch them? Because they were a humane service. So they caught and then released the skunk. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking right now, they just went outside the park, opened up the door, and then it came right back inside the park. Nope. There is actually a wildlife refuge about 4.5 miles up the road from the park. Not in a straight line either. It was a couple freeways over, but it was roughly 5 miles away from the park. And he says we actually take them and we go to the wildlife refuge and actually drop them off there so they can just be free in that. And I said, oh, so this is a new skunk. He says, not really. Skunks can remember where they were. They will find their way back to where they were. Sometimes he says over 10 miles. And that just blew my mind. I'm like, skunks can find their way back over 10 miles? That is crazy. Skunks were a huge problem at the park. And they're definitely one thing you don't want guests around because they will for sure, if they can find the skunk and the skunk is there, they will get scared and they will get sprayed. And then that is no fun. You pretty much have to destroy all your clothes because it can't be salvaged. And then you're taking a bath with special stuff to try to get that smell of skunk off of you, which unfortunately, if you got sprayed, first thing you got to do is drive home. Now that's in your car. Let's move off the ground and go into some things that fly. One of the first ones that was always troublesome was pigeons. Pigeons are, a lot of people refer to them as rats with wings. Yeah, they're not great. So pigeons will get their way and they'll make their way into the eaves of rides and stuff like that and put up nests there. And if you've ever been around pigeons' nests, that's all they do is poop off the side of their nest, and it makes a gigantic mess. And it's actually grounds for like a hazmat type team to come in and clean that pigeon poop because it's got all sorts of bacteria and things like that as you clean it can become airborne and you can inhale it into your lungs. No good. So you actually have to have a lot of times special teams come in and clean up pigeon poop when it's in a large mess. So if you've ever gone into buildings and seen, like if you look up in the eaves and see this like wire mesh material all over this indoor style, like where the awnings or the eaves are exposed and you could see all the beams, but there's like a mesh up across the front of it. That's to prevent pigeons from getting on the inside and nesting. It is one of those things, if you take away their food source, then you make the area not desirable to come back to. But unfortunately, they're out and about during the day while people are there. If you're dropping food on the ground, they will get the food. Pigeons will do it. If you've ever been around any of the water areas, I know a lot of my viewers are out there, Cedar Point, seagulls and stuff like that get out there. They'll snatch stuff right out of your hand.
Mine.
It's like, yep, it's gone out of your hand. So they come back for the food. So extra hard to get rid of around those particular areas. Then you talk about smaller things with wings like bees and wasps. Like, these are not good things around in general because a lot of times when you disturb the area, you anger them. And then they come out and then people can get hurt. A lot of people have allergic reaction to wasp and bee stings, so it's really not a good environment to put people in. Now, a lot of the times you could find these nests and exterminate them at nighttime. We did have permission to use the aerosol spray stuff, and go out to like a wasp nest at nighttime and spray that. If you ever do that, you want to do it at nighttime. That's when they're calm and docile, and you could pretty much spray the whole nest. I had one. Wooden roller coasters are notorious for wasp and bees. There's so many angles and joints that all the wood comes into. There's plenty of little areas for those critters to get inside of and start to make their nest. And then next thing you know, I remember I went to Worlds of Fun going up the lift hill. I remember several rides. It was as we were going up the lift hill on the wooden roller coaster, you could see bees kind of swarming. You could see them going around, and they were wasps actually that were going around there because they had made a nest close to the top, and then while the ride was running, it was shaking the nest, and it was irritating them. So luckily we weren't harmed or anything as we go by there, but it's like, yeah, all over the place you could see bees around and wasps around. When we would come across those nests in proximity to people or that were too close to a ride where they were coming into the ride envelope, which means you can get struck by one, which means it could land on you and get stung while you're on the ride, we would typically take the ride down for safety, and then we'd have to figure out how to exterminate the nest. Now, if they were really active and they were being aggressive, typically people did not want to exterminate those at nighttime or during the daytime, so we had to wait until nighttime and send a night shift out, and we pretty much leave the ride down and we ride on the turnover, and we explain to the PM crew when they came in, hey, right here at this location there's a big wasp nest that has grown, and anyone who's worked with wasp nests know they go fast. They move fast. They do. So it's like, please go out and spray that, and a lot of times they do, and the next day we double check it, yep, it's gone, and we open the ride back up. One time we came in, we went into our SLC, and in the infield there was this big, looked like a pile of rags sitting on a pillar or down on the cement footer, and we were like, what is that? Started walking over to it and noticed there were some bees around the area, and it was still early morning when it was still cold and it was still kind of dark, but we noticed there was some bees around the area. It's like, why are there bees right here? And then we go up and notice that the huge pile on the ground was just a massive pile of bees sitting there. So we did not know this, or I did not know this, but when bees move their hive, they have nothing to go into for warmth at nighttime. So what they do is they put the queen down at the bottom, and all the bees just pile on top of each other, and they make this huge, literally just bucket of bees sitting out there on the platform or out wherever it might be. And that outermost layer of bees literally dies overnight because it gets too cold for them. They have no hive. So they literally die overnight. But we had to actually leave the ride down for that day because we had to call in a beekeeper to come in and move them, because those were honeybees. In California, I believe it's the U.S. in general, honeybees are now on the endangered species list. So you can't kill honeybees. You have to pay a hive person to come in and actually extract those bees and relocate that colony to a different area. So honeybees are actually a little troublesome by now just because they're in the endangered species list. Things that fly, things that swim. In our area, we actually had a large population of ducks. What's ducks had to do with anything? Well, ducks will get into water rides. Ducks love doing it all the time. They can get in just fine, but a lot of times they can't get out. What would happen on a rapids ride is ducks would get into the big pool down at the bottom where all the water is stored. They would get into that pool and they would bring their little ducklings along with them too, little baby ducklings. And there'd be like 7 or 8 ducks in the water, which for adults, it's not a problem. Those ducks can fly, so they will just swim right out of the water and fly away. Well, the problem is that their ducklings can't. And when you start the water ride up, that water level drops by about a foot and a half, depending on the ride. That water level drops down, so that little curb that they jumped off and got into the water, now those little ducks can't jump back up. So now the ride has little tiny ducklings in them, and they're swimming around there, and eventually they will get sucked down towards the deep end. they will not be able to swim against the strong current that the water rapids ride produces, and they'll just get sucked down and sucked into the pumps. Not a great thing. It's not great for people to see at all. It's not something you want to experience at all. So it's just one of those things that's like, okay, when you get ducks in the ride, you have to shoo them out of there. We've had sometimes a team of people in the deep end of the ride just out there with nets and anything reflective to try to hoard them into one particular area to get the ducks out of the water and back onto the land and shoo them away from the ride. That way you can start the pumps up and put the ride into operation. How it sucks when you're a guest and you're there on a really hot day and the ride is actually down. It's like, why is the rapids ride down on this hot day? It's like, because there's ducks in it. We can't get the ducks out of there. That's why they're in there. But sometimes we'll have like 4 or 5 people swimming around trying to get the ducks out of that thing. On the shoot-to-shoot rides, we had a ramp in the back. There was a nice little graded ramp down there where a vehicle could drive down to take boats in and out of service. So that ramp was really easy. You just shoot ducks towards that ramp, and they were all, even the little ones, were able to just climb up and get out of the water. Wasn't a big deal for that. Plus, most shoot-to-shoot rides, log flume style rides, they're only a couple feet deep, 2.5-ish feet deep. They're not deep at all. So you didn't have to worry about them too much. But ducks on the water ride, yeah, I had to worry about them. Squirrels. Squirrels are nasty little critters as well, because they get all over everything. They can climb up and get inside of anywhere, even really high up on a ride. They can climb up and get in those places. And squirrels like to chew on wiring. That's not good for a lot of rides that have just big cables and stuff strung out all over the place that actually carry communication wiring on the inside. So squirrels actually prefer the taste of that rubber shell that's on the outside of the cable. It actually tastes good to them. So what squirrels are actually doing is they're actually using that outer plastic sheath or rubber sheath, and they're actually stripping it apart to take it back to their nest to go make nest for the kids back home. So they will get in there and they will chew up the plastic sheathing on the outside of the wire. They will chew through the wire. They will chew out pieces of the wire, and they work really quick too because they're not stopping by anything. We had our hawk ride, which is a Zamperla hawk. It was a 48. We had a whole bunch of, if you ever seen the inside of those arms, they are nothing but a bird's nest of electrical wiring on the inside. We had a squirrel get inside one of the arms, and it tore up so much stuff. We had the ride down for, I think, 3 weeks, roughly, somewhere right around there. We had it down for a couple of weeks trying to fix all the damage that squirrel had done in just a couple of hours worth of work. It was bad. So I don't like squirrels. They chew on wiring. It's not great. It's funny, though, when you see a squirrel around the park sitting there on a fence and it's got a giant ice cream Snickers bar in its mouth. Just a squirrel sitting there with this big Snickers bar. And I don't know where they got them from, but it was always a squirrel and it was always a Snickers bar. I guess, Snickers have nuts on the inside, so I guess that's what they're going after. I had a buddy that was working over on the, what was that? I think it was on the north end of the park over there. And the squirrels also became a little domesticated because they were so used to being around people as well. They would also go to people to get food and bring the food back. So my buddy was over there, and he was eating a candy bar, and this squirrel came right out to him in the middle of this pathway. The park was closed. Came right out to him in the pathway and just sat there and stared at him. And he thought it was funny. He's like, why is this squirrel just staring at me? Just sitting there. Almost looked like it was begging like a dog does. It was just sitting there looking at him like it wanted some of that candy bar. And he thought it was hilarious. He egged the squirrel on. He's like, what, you want some of my candy bar? And right when he did that, he said that squirrel jumped up his leg and just like 2 jumps off his leg, 1 off his arm, and grabbed the candy bar and then ran. And it was like, oh, Okay, that's kind of scary because you think about, rabies and stuff like that that squirrels and other little animals could carry. That's not great. But those can get around there really quick. Those are also varmint like mice. Mice also get around the park. Mice and rats are everywhere inside of amusement parks, again, because of the overwhelming amount of food that parks have on the inside of them. They get in there. You can bring in natural predators for mice because there's a lot of hawks and things like that that are just natural to the area that will feed on those mice. But you can also bring in cats, and cats will naturally hunt mice throughout the park. This is one thing, especially this is one thing Disney does for sure. On the like around the Tom Sawyer's Island area of Disneyland, they have lots of cats that live out there. And they own the cats, they take care of the cats, but the cats are specifically there at nighttime to hunt mice around the park. Now, parks don't like talking about their critter problems just because it's like, guests don't want to hear about it. But it is one of those things that's like, parks spend an overwhelming amount of effort doing all of this to make sure that it doesn't impact your day. So I thought it was one of those things for this video. It's like, yeah, people could know about this. People should know about this. So that's one of the reasons why I'm making the video. But yeah, so Disney, cats to control the mice. And the cats are maintained, they're out of the way. In fact, if you see them, you might see them very first thing in the morning, but then throughout the majority of the day, the cats just go out of the park area and they just find a place and sleep throughout the entire day until nighttime comes up, and then they're back out hunting for small mice again. Helps control the population. Not much you can do at amusement parks other than that, aside from just trapping and putting out lots of poison stations and bait stations and things like that, trying to control that mice population. Locking up the dumpsters, keeping them sealed, of course, is number one thing. Getting food out of trash cans quickly so the critters can't get in there and find it in the first place. Another thing, park services, typically that's what a lot of parks call it, park services or custodial teams have to get in there really fast to take that food out of those stations all the time, because you have to do it while the park is open too, because leaving food in there while the park is open is just as bad as doing it while the park is closed, unfortunately. This year, things that fly, we noticed that the mayflies infestation around Cedar Point was really bad. It was a really bad year this year for some reason. Around the May-ish time frame, early June, the mayflies were just out there, and it was one of those things I was told since I was going to the park the first time towards the end of June. I was told, oh yeah, nighttime, right around sunset, they're like, don't ride in the front row of those rides because there are so many mayflies out. They will just pepper your clothing with you'll just splatter all over everything, in your teeth, in your face. They're like, it's bad. So they're like, once it gets out of the hot heat of the day and the sun starts to go down, they're like, start moving further towards the back to try to lower your mayfly incursions out on the track. I thought that was funny, but I know I saw lots of pictures and stuff of people that were just covered in smushed mayflies, and that did not look good. Not much you can do about that. Mayflies and mosquitoes and things that fly around out there, you could try to reduce some of the water in standing areas, but especially if you're in an area that gets a lot of moisture, fog, rain, that sort of things, there's not too much you can do about that. Unless you let your bird population go out of control to where they're out there eating the larvae that's sitting in the water, frogs, natural predator type stuff. Okay, I saved the bad topic for last, which I think this is the last topic. The way my brain works sometimes, I don't never know if I'm going to just roll on to a different topic after this. But this is a topic that a lot of people would not really want to talk much about, but it's all over the park. It's everywhere, it's on everything, it's in every corner, it's in every nook, it's in every cranny. And that is the arachnid or spider population around the park. Now, spiders are everywhere. They're on everything. A lot of things eat them. You could bring in more spiders to eat the other spiders. There's lots of things. There's wolf spiders and things like that that will eat other spiders. But most of the spiders you see, they're common field spiders. They're little tiny things. They're daddy long legs. And all they do is they get on stuff and they're a nuisance. They just make a mess out of everything. Now, you're saying like, wait, they're so nasty. They're so bad. How can you just say they just make a mess out of everything? I've dealt with spiders for so long, so many years dealing with spiders, that the shock factor of spiders crawling around on stuff, that shock factor is almost gone for me, right? And now all I see is just their web that's left over, and it's just like, it is visually nasty. It is just like, oh my gosh, I have to clean them up. Just got to clean them up. So how do you get rid of spiders? Well,
I'm going to burn that spider heel rack whether you like it or not.
Philip, Walt, we're here for the same reason. Let's burn her down.
The first thing you have to do is, if you can, get rid of their food source, which most of the time you won't be able to. Spiders typically congregate around lights and things like that, where there's lots of little tiny gnats flying around. That's their food source. You can't just shut off the lights in a park. So pretty much you're always going to have lights, you're always going to have gnats. That's going to attract spiders, and spiders are always going to be around that area. So what can you do? There's not a ton you can do, but to keep rides clean and areas clean, the most you could do that's effective is to constantly clean off the spider webs. Okay, that's the first thing, is to clean off the spider webs. Now, this is not really hard to do. There's tools to do it, like a big long extension broom that goes up to areas and you can just knock the spider web down. So this is the best tool to use to get down spider webs and stuff. This guy is on an extension pole to get me up to like 25 feet away and get up in the corners and just brush the webs out of there. They work great. Look at that guy. Made a little nest right there, a little house right by the light. Just go up there, knock them down. Now a lot of times you could, then right here in the corner, see? It's all this stuff that makes, something that could appear neat, appear just really dirty. Spider webs they just make everything look dirty and used. So you really, really want to keep these areas cleaned out in amusement parks. You don't want spiders and stuff all over things. Or you could simply just use like a shop rag. We always used to carry shop rags with us, and you simply just take the shop rag and you just wipe the stuff down, and you say, okay, when there's a spider web on it, you just wipe that spider web off. Difference between a spider web and a cobweb, anybody know? Anybody know? It's actually really simple. Spider web still has the resident attached to it. A cobweb does not. So spider webs are actually clean. They're very nice and neat looking. They're clean. There's nothing in them. You might be able to see the white webbing that's there that's actually making the web. It might be in a pattern. It might be an entrapment style, like a daddy long leg, where they just make a big like bleh of a web all over something. But that is a spider web. And a cobweb is a spider web where the spider is no longer there. It's left. It's gone away. It's either died. It's been eaten by something else. And now that web is just collecting dust and dirt and debris and pieces of leaves. The cobwebs are actually the things that make a ride look run down. So it's hard to say, but it's like, oh yeah, when you see cobwebs and spider webs on things, it looks run down. Even though those things work fast. I remember I would go out onto our air panels on the SLC. They're just covered in spider webs. So it's like, okay, I do my best and I'd wipe everything off of there. The key for keeping things out of there is evicting the tenant that's in that location. So if you can, while you're wiping things down, if you see that spider fall down and fall out of there, it's like, good, break the web underneath it. Once that spider is gone, that web won't come back. Out at our floorless coaster, we played spider baseball, and that was one thing. We had the field spiders out there that would always spin a web that was like, cylindrical down to the center, your classic spider web. And what you do is you take a little ruler or something and hold it between your fingers and just barely touch the center of that web, And most of the time that spider from the corner would run right down just as fast as it could right into the center, and then you take your ruler and go and snap it out of there, and you flick the spider off and it would fall down outside of the work bay out there. That was spider baseball. So the reason we played spider baseball is because once you knocked that spider out of there and either killed it or got it off the work bay somewhere, you could now wipe that web out, and then the next day that web won't reappear again. Wiring ladders are really bad for spiders because they have like hollow rungs in the center. So overhead on the SLC, we had a big wiring cable tray up there that had those hollow rungs in there. Inside every single rung, you could not see it. It was just solid because there was a spider web, spider whatever on the inside. So every once in a while, I get up there with compressed air and just blow the center of that out and just blow the thing out and blow the spider web out. I asked if I could put expanding foam back inside the rung to try to seal it, but the park didn't want me to do that. They said, nope, just leave it open. So I was like, okay. I don't know, I think they're worried about corrosion or something. Not sure why. It seemed like a good deal for me. On water rides, spiders will also cause breakdowns by getting onto the photo eyes that talk with the PLC. They will make their web and crawl right in front of the lens, and then you'll have water rides stopping because the ride thinks it's got a boat or a log in that section, when in reality nothing is there. So spiders cause breakdowns on photo eye type rides all the time. Get them out of there, clean it, evict with extreme prejudice. At our water ride, from back when the video started, I was talking about that giant orb spider that was out in front of the house. At our water rides, we had, this overhead like support structure that was there for shade, and we had these big poles sticking up, and that queue line was filled with giant orb spiders. So those things, and what they're notorious for is spinning a web across like a 10-foot diameter square, right? Like this huge thing. They'd spin this web, but the worst part about them is they would sit dead center of the web. Unlike a lot of spiders, they wait off in the corner. These guys would sit dead center of the web. So as you're walking through early in the morning, if you walk through one of those webs, there's a chance now that spider is on you somewhere. Now, they're not really, they won't really hurt you. They might bite you if they were, antagonized a bunch. But it's just a feeling. When you walk through a spider web, you can't get that feeling off of you for the rest of the day. If you feel like that's on you, like even right now, I want to wipe my face because I feel like it's on me now. Just talking about it, it's a visual thing. It's like once you get that spider web on you somewhere, you feel it for the rest of the day. So imagine getting a spider web on you and knowing there is a friggin' quarter-size spider on you somewhere. Like, oof, that's not good. I had a guy that would get spider bites all over his neck. And we were asked, like, why? He was the mechanic for our boomerang. It's like, why are you getting spider bites all over your neck? And he's like, oh, I got tons of them. And it's just like, okay. I was out there with him one day. Precursor to this, there's no smoking in the park, right? But I'm out there with him one day, and he's underneath the ride smoking. Right? He doesn't work there anymore, so can't do anything about it. But he's underneath the ride smoking. And it's not until I'm with him that I'm watching, and I notice that underneath the boomerang, you're standing right underneath the station while you're working on the bottom side of the train, that smoke is going straight up into the corners of the station, and all the spiders that were living up there, because there's little webs all over the place out there, all those spiders would get super irritated and pissed off, and they would drop down. Now they were like, thought they were on fire or something, I don't know, but they would drop down just angry as could be when they did. They weren't like sometimes you see a spider like come down on its web and it's going down to somewhere else. These things would like drop, like panic drop. And I'm like, it's because you're smoking underneath here. That's why they're panicked, because the smoke's like you're smoking them out of their house. That's why you're getting bitten. It's like, the worst area we had for spiders that no one really wanted to deal with was underneath our teacups ride. Our teacups ride underneath the platform. You don't think anything of, you're walking on the platform to go get in the teacup. It's like, okay, underneath there in our particular one, there was a 10-foot deep pit underneath that thing. So you could stand underneath there and walk around and do all the service and stuff like that. Well, the thing had so many cobwebs and so many spider webs, and then it didn't help that the manufacturer painted everything black to start with underneath there. So there was just so many spider webs and spiders and all sorts of stuff underneath there. Like, you would have these little dim lights that were lit in the corners, but when you looked across something, it was just a sea of spider webs. It was really just nasty to think about. It was just like, oh my gosh. But we were working there one time, and I saw this thing that was straight out of a horror movie. It was such a horrible thing to look at. It was like, oh my gosh, what is that? So now, knowing what I know later on, basically the spider had died. It was just like a daddy long leg. That's all it was. But it was like, it's about golf ball size. The spider had died, and then sometimes when spiders die, they get a fungus on them. A fungus grows, and the fungus turns white. Well, the spider's dead. There's nothing, it's just basically their little body decaying. But here I am looking at this spider hanging in the web that's basically white and fuzzy, and it's big, big white and fuzzy spider. I did not come across that one. That one was called to me. They called me on the radio and said, you've got to come down and see this. And we were all just like, ooh, man, that's gross. White, fuzzy spider. Ooh. But unfortunately, spider webs and cobwebs are one of the number one instant feedback things from people. That is the easiest thing to find for most people. If people are waiting in line and they're staring at a bunch of spider webs in the ceiling or cobwebs on the ride or something like that, there's not much you can do. The perception is the ride is not being taken care of, no matter what. So you use your operations personnel when they're cleaning, use park services, use all sorts of people and say, look, okay, we're cleaning it, it's working, we're doing our job, but it's really not a good thing. All right. I think that's been enough for this video. Probably creeped most people out and they clicked off of it by now. But if you got any comments, want to say anything, just leave it in the comments downstairs. You can always email me, RyanTheRideMechanic@yahoo.com. And remember, stay off the air gates. Bye. If you want to do me a favor, go ahead and click on one of these videos so you can watch something else from the channel. That helps get my channel in your algorithm, and it helps me get the channel out to everybody else as well. Thanks a lot.